I will call the meeting for the Conservation Commission for January 2nd open. And I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes for December 19th.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. And we have some new public hearings. Number 13, Lot 6, Farm Road.
That's the,
I will read that in while you're setting up. Under the Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law is amended, and the West Bridgewater Wetland Protection Bylaw Rules and Regulations. The West Bridgewater Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing January 2nd in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street, for a request for determination of applicability filed on behalf of the farm at West Meadow LLC to construct a single-family home and associated site within 100 feet of a bordering vegetated wetland at 13 Lot 6 Farm Road.
Larry Silva from Silva Engineering Associates. This is Lot 6, and as you can see, the grading and everything that we show in here comes up to the 100-foot buffer zone. But in response to John's comment, which is a very good comment, that it's hard to believe that even if you keep all your grading, everything outside the 100, that there won't be some activity that'll occur in here, either by creation of a better surface in terms of lawn, or just over time, that somebody's gonna wanna push out further. So by doing it as an RDA, we can put some conditions on it that'll allow for some permanent markers, conservation signs at the edge of the conservation easement, which would make sure that there would be no misunderstanding about what you can do and what you can't do. So for that reason, we submitted it as an RDA.
So what determines the conservation easement?
That was originally shown on the subdivision plan and got recorded as a conservation easement
Oh, okay.
at the Registry of Deeds.
Okay.
And so it actually does a little bit more protection than the 50-foot buffer. You can see the 50-foot buffer kind of towards the rear lot line, but the conservation easement was extended away from that, so in some areas we have more than the 50, which is an excellent compensation for other areas that were a little closer.
Now, in the future, can we do this? Can we make can we make a line to where we want it? Say half and half from the 50, half from the 100, if we wanted to, or is that something?
It's already recorded that way.
No, I know, but I'm talking about in the future with other ones.
Oh,
If we
yeah.
wanted to do that, could we just do it to what we think, like 20 feet off, half and half?
Yep.
Okay.
John, do you want to make any comments other than what Larry already said?
Yeah,
from
he
your-
pretty much, I don't know how he saw my notes ahead of time. He's pretty good.
So that's one retina, now I can see forever now.
So, for all the reasons that he suggested, I did ask that they put up the conservation signs along the 50, along the conservation easement. And because of that, there is no impact on the wetland, so it doesn't need a filing of a notice of intent. So I'm recommending issuing a -3 determination, which means that the project is subject to the Wetlands Protection Act, but that it won't impact the wetlands and does not require a notice of intent.
Anybody have any other questions?
No, looks like we're outside all
Hearing none, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make the motion.
second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved, and I will entertain a motion to issue a -3 determination.
Motion to issue the -3.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. I'll take,
Oops, sorry.
take those. Thanks, Larry.
How are you doing? Happy New Year, everybody.
Next, we we have 254, 256 Pleasant Street.
Yes. Larry Silva again, from Silver Engineering Associates. This project is at the, as you're going down Pleasant Street, on the right-hand side, just before you get to the crossover that goes to the left. It goes under 24, so it's industrial site there. It's the one that had a lot of steel that was being stored on it. This came before you before. There was an order of conditions that was issued. It was done by Hermano Engineering, I believe. And as part of the work, there was a drainage, extensive drainage basin that was constructed in the back of the site. There was silt fence that was installed. This is the most recent aerial. You can see that the silt fence was along the back in here. And the change now is that we're not proposing any changes in here, but we're proposing the change of what the site is going to be used for. Okay, so I started it that way so that I could tell you that I did get a call from Natural Heritage, and the woman there, Lauren, was asking about the silt fence and whether or not any of that other work had been done before. So I was updating her. I'm going to have a conversation with her tomorrow. I guess she was out of the office, but she wanted to talk with me tomorrow about it, and I guess she'll be responding to you folks about the NOI. So the difference here is instead of the steel that was being stored out there, there's a series of office warehouses that are to be constructed. So here's your existing conditions prior to, well, this is showing that the drainage basin is shown right in here. And so these it's going to be changed to be in a series of office warehouses on a common septic system, which would be out to the front here. So that's pretty far away from this resource area, And then the drainage is all being controlled, and it'll be funneled into the same basin. We've done the calculations on it. This was pretty big to begin with, so that was actually to our benefit that it was actually kind of oversized. It has all these individual five and pretty much all 5-unit buildings. We originally had different size ones. Tied to, they have a tight tank for the interior floor drains that each one of these buildings will be tied to, so that stuff does not go to the drainage. And that the drainage itself will be all collected and brought back to the stormwater basin in the back, while the septic is all being brought together and brought to the front. Snow storage areas are shown and so forth. And so we're really at the beginning stage of going to zoning board. So like the one that we did, which was for the property next door, the Trevico property, and that's for you to understand, Trevico is the one is on this side here. So what I'm going to suggest to you is that you continue this public hearing until we get further along in the zoning board process, at which time they'll be doing an evaluation of the drainage and so forth, which I think is what you relied on a little bit too when you were doing the Trevico one. So I think that we'd be going sort of the same route at this point, and that's what I would suggest that the commission do if you see that would be the right way to go.
Those are individual
units.
Are they gonna have
So this is a
bathrooms in
building, a
each one?
5-unit building. They're 1,500 square foot units, I believe.
Are they having a bathroom in each one of those?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, that's why they all have to be tied together to a common septic.
Commons. So,
Yeah, it wasn't a fun one to design, let me tell you.
well, I see what they were doing
The
out
septic
front
is down in here.
I just see over a period of time that they just seemed like they just kept filling it or something like that, or changed it around, and we didn't know what was going on with it.
They were, that was when they were trying to get ready to do the septic.
Yeah, I understand that.
Well, what happened was, when I went out there and I did test pits, I said, well, look, I first went out there, seeing the perks that were done before by Hermano. He did some on this side over here. Well, he had one that was a decent one, then there was one that wasn't decent next to it, and there wasn't really a lot of room to support something like this. So we fished around and looked to see where the soils might be better, and we found that in this area here should be better. So then but there was deep, it was very deep where I was gonna have to do it. So I told Todd Nico, who's the contractor, I said, look it, for me to do perk tests over here, you gotta have a huge hole here for me to be able to do this. So there was a lot of preparation and groundwater pumping for a while in order to be able to get to the point where he was able to be ready to do the perk test. And then once he was ready and he had a plateau down there for us to do it, that's when we came in to do the perk test. So that's why it was there for a long time. And then Lucini and the ZBA were upset with them because they were supposed to have had screening up here, and there was other provisions from before, from the previous approval that they had when Hermano had brought those plans forward. And so they had to address some of those issues with some fencing and so forth to take away the line of sight from the street, which is one of the things Lucini wanted to do. And so there was some of that work. And then
Like a ditch over on that side next to the house?
the ditches, there's a ditch that's down in
Not
this
that
area
way.
here, going
The other
down
way
that
towards
way
the
there.
house. The other side.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry,
There's
there's a
a-
ditch along in here, but it was
but I'm
in the
talking about
previous.
Berm or something along the.
Yeah, but that was a big issue with
Yeah.
people that were there last time when this first started. With the water, the next thing you know, filling it in, putting up the, it's like, I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what was going on because there was no talk about this in the past.
Well, there was though, wasn't there?
You could have almost guessed that that's what it was gonna come to in the future, and now here it is.
Yeah.
So we kinda had an idea.
The residential property just to the,
On this side over here, the horse farm?
the original plans and the order conditions required that the swale be extended from the front of the property all the way back to there to collect any runoff would be dammed up by raising the grade on the subject property. And so there needs to be a swale to prevent any damming of the water so that their horse corral doesn't become a pond in the spring.
I think the original people actually moved, right?
I don't know, did they?
I think they.
The original one did, yes.
Because it was such a big concern.
I know that there was, I didn't know,
I know that was a
well,
big issue.
that condition, I guess, so what you're saying is that we have to be sure that there is a provision in here to get that water over to the swale there.
Yeah.
Okay.
It should
And
have been-
once they did go in and stop the filling towards that property and creating a dam and dug in a swale, it did seem to alleviate the issue with them.
Okay. But I'll make sure that as we go forward here, that issue is addressed. And that was on the previous order?
Yep.
I think that was one of the main issues too.
Was it? Yeah.
Well, it wasn't that long ago, was it?
No.
No, it really wasn't though, was it?
We also looked at that as a,
I remember
Gravel
the
surface.
discussions of the
Yeah,
state.
those all gonna be.
all going to be gravel and
Gravel, nothing else.
no recharge, and everything was gonna be drained so that it could percolate back in without having to
Oh, no.
put all the stormwater system in, which,
Of course, it was no talk about, it was just storage. So now all that's gonna be blacktopped?
No.
No? Nothing's gonna be blacktopped?
Just around the
Not in
buildings.
that area.
no,
No, no, no,
the
just
the
the
whole
whole-
site,
Oh, the site. yes.
90% of it was gonna be left gravel
Yeah.
the last time we looked at it.
Yeah, no.
And now it's 85% asphalt.
Well, there's a lot of asphalt, yeah. But the drainage basin itself, like I say, was so big that we were able to, because at first, when I first looked at the site, I said, geez, that thing's huge.
That's why you can
That's-
almost kinda think that's what they were thinking ahead of time.
Oh, I don't think they were thinking that well.
No, they're doing it now.
We're giving
so-
them a hell of a lot more credit than
That's a bunch.
I don't know what made him change direction.
Total direction.
Yeah,
No.
I mean, because
Yeah, I mean, you
the
can't
need
get
for
much
that
more.
storage site was huge at the time. 'cause
What he said to me, what Ray Johnson said to me was that he found it impossible to have good, I don't wanna say competent, but reliable people to actually maintain that, storage yard for the steel.
But he was moving
And
that
so it became
from the place
something
where
that
it
was too difficult for him to continue to do, and he decided that he was gonna move the steel somewhere else. And then, and some of it he's getting out of that business in some ways, but for the steel that he is still gonna have, he's moving it elsewhere, and I think mostly indoor, in a covered area as opposed to outside.
Yeah.
I don't know the rest of them, I didn't know him back then, you know, so I was introduced to them later. So, I will look at that, the order of conditions that was issued, to see what was required on that too, to see if I can address that.
Has the ZBA given you a date yet?
I didn't see it in my schedule.
Okay.
If it came in recently.
I haven't seen anything on it, but
I don't see anything posted yet.
You want to continue it to the next meeting, or do you want to go?
Oh, I think I'm gonna have to go for a while. So why don't we go, you wanna jump it for like,
Put a month out in February, and then you can let us.
yeah. Let's say at least a month, I'd say, and then, or if you wanna go longer, depends on how confident you wanna be about your schedule.
first meeting in March, just to update us.
That would be probably better, I think.
Okay.
Because when I meet with them, they're gonna hire a consultant and stuff, so it's gonna get delayed in terms of getting anywhere with it. So the first meeting continue the first meeting in March would be more realistic, I think.
Right. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to continue to the first meeting in March.
I'll second it.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Hi.
So moved.
Do you have any idea what that date is? No?
I will-
First Tuesday.
That calendar hanging on the door,
I'm bringing a new one tomorrow,
Okay.
okay?
It will be the 6th, March 6th.
I was hoping that Kitty was here because I was gonna ask her about whether or not she wanted to go to an illustration of the watershed there.
oh, the
The
Nucatesset Greenway?
Yeah.
You had that on
We
calendars
did
at one
one
time.
a few years ago like that. I didn't know if she might want to do it again or not, or if there was an updated one.
Just a comment about my meeting report for this one. Makes me believe that somehow they've hacked into the system and can read my reports as I'm writing them, because he covered just about everything that I put in my report for the commission, so.
You can get anything through Russia.
Enough said. Sorry I brought it up.
102 West Center Street is our next.
The abutters were notified on this? You turned that in already? I did notice.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I gave him that.
Okay,
I gave him everything, too.
thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Happy New Year.
Yes, same to you, stay warm, and I will deliver calendar.
So, for 102 West Center Street, under the Wetland Protection Act, Chapter 131, Section 40 of Mass General Law as amended, and the West Bridgewater Wetland Protection Bylaw rules and regulations, the West Bridgewater Conservation Commission will hold a public hearing January 2nd in the McDonald Brown Conference Room, 65 North Main Street, for an amended order of conditions filed on behalf of Shamrock Partners LLC to construct an additional commercial building and parking area within 100 feet of a bordering vegetative wetland at 102 West Center Street. We're open.
Good evening, Dave Hunter from Collins Civil Engineering Group.
Did you notify the abutters?
Green cards.
We did not open up, we did not notify the abutters, I don't believe.
It
don't
was
know if that was-
advertised, but the abutters should have been notified on this one.
Or we can certainly reopen the hearing after we notify the abutters. We're not in any rush for this, obviously because of the winter conditions, but if that's the board's wish, we can certainly do that.
I'd recommend it,
Yep.
only because they really,
Follow
Should
Yeah.
know.
It-
Yeah,
Okay.
should know.
too bad. I think,
No, it's really not an inconvenience at all.
Okay.
It's something that we're more than willing to do.
the, works out better.
Yeah,
than-
it works out better.
All right, I will
I don't think.
motion to
there's a
continue.
Continue.
Motion to
Um,
continue with.
Or we can't even.
yeah,
open the
Yeah,
hearing
yeah, you
until-
can open it
We
and
can open
continue
it,
it
and continue.
without the discussion, so
Okay.
you're all right.
Okay, motion to
The
continue
next-
till
Till the 16th?
Till the 16th?
Yeah, so
That would be
they would have to be notified at
2
least
weeks.
5 days
5
before.
days before. So,
So-
yeah, the 16th would work for us, yeah.
Okay.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
So we never really opened.
Not really.
Well,
I
we
mean,
did open.
we read it into the record and didn't take anything from it. Uh, 359 Pleasant Street?
Yes, sir. Well, we were here last time and we reviewed the project. I think the only thing we were waiting for was National Heritage to respond, and they have not. We did submit updated plans for the alternative layout, which we spoke of last time, which you have in front of you. I have additional ones if you need. I didn't bring a
Nope, we're
presentation.
good.
Okay.
He's got plenty.
Basically, it doesn't change the envelope. The pavement envelope around the perimeter is the same. It just gets rid of, gives them the option of not doing the two big climate control buildings and doing 3 smaller buildings. So, basically it.
So,
We're waiting for the letter.
We're just waiting for the
Yeah,
response to.
Yeah, they've had, I think, plenty of time. I think
Basically,
30 days,
they're
I
the
think
same.
30 days today.
footprint, right?
Excuse me?
It's gonna be basically the same footprint?
Correct.
same- Okay.
Yeah, that's about it.
Good.
So the only question I have, Tom, is if we write the order of conditions, we generally refer to the plan. So
I think the regional plans you'd reference.
we'd reference the 2 different plans.
Correct.
Noting that one was an option, or that they are optional. And I think we can cover it that way in an order of conditions. So what I would recommend is that Tom doesn't have, unless he, of course, wants to come back to the next meeting, that
Oh, I like you all, but.
we should be able to continue this until we get that letter, and then just immediately close it,
Close the
since
hearing,
there's
yeah.
no outstanding issues unless the commission has some.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
Usually,
Do they have an obligation to do it within 30, or do
they have an obligation within 30 days. It's right around that 30 days right now. I think today might be the 30th day. but
With the holidays and
with the
everything.
holidays and everything, I don't imagine they're gonna have a lot of problem with this, because if you look at the GIS maps,
It's fine.
the site's not in it, and everything around it is. We've got a little bit of work in the back, but it's all drainage improvements that we're doing.
Okay.
So,
It's,
Yeah, I think
It's-
that's the biggest thing with the back part.
yeah.
and considering the weather, I'm guessing you're not ready to start right
No.
away.
and
I mean, cold
That's
steel,
fine.
that's not a fun thing right now.
No, I think we're good right now.
in natural heritage, usually if everything's being done on an existing disturbed site, they don't, even though it's in the general zone of the endangered species, they don't consider it what they call a take, or taking away from the habitat of the species, so they don't usually ask for anything more, but they want to have that option to review it, and so they do require the simultaneous filing with their department. And so I think it's just a matter of that they probably just going through the routine, and they'll probably issue it as no issue at all.
No, just saying, when this was built, back how many years ago, Did they have to go in front of, did they have to get a letter from the national?
Oh, highly doubt it.
I was
I
gonna
don't
say
know.
that-
I think the site is 1972,
Oh, okay.
maybe?
Yeah.
Because I don't think
Yeah.
that was even,
Yeah, they didn't have
No.
a formal
Even
Wetlands
cons-
Protection Act
yeah,
back
okay.
then.
True.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that.
Just a twinkle in the
Okay, that sounds good to me.
All right?
All right, thank you,
All
folks.
right, I'll
Happy New
entertain a
Year.
motion to continue to the next hearing.
I'll make that motion.
Second.
Moving second, all
Anything
those
else
in
comes
favor?
up, Sean, you know where to find me.
So
Yep.
moved.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thanks, Tom.
And we have had a request for Luke Estates to continue.
Wow.
All right.
Does John want to give us an update before I move to continue?
I received a late in the afternoon email from the engineer saying that the planning board's review engineer has reviewed the project that is now pending before us, and that there were only a few things that the review engineer wanted. And since he was away with his family over the holidays, he didn't have enough time to make the changes. So he anticipates that sometime this week, the changes will be submitted to the commission. And so he's prepared to come in at the next meeting and make his presentation, and he feels at that point that it'll be approved by the planning board. He doesn't want to speak for them, but he feels that he's addressed everything, and so that he's that close to final approval. So I said that it would be best that, we get the plan just the way the planning board wanted, because we had it all reviewed by the 53G, and I made a determination that his changes weren't that different from what the 53G had reviewed, so I was relying on the planning board's engineer to pick up on any small housekeeping type items, and so I didn't feel it was necessary to go back to the 53G. So I think we'll be all set to approve it at the next meeting.
I will entertain a motion to continue Luke Estates roadway and the lots, all as one.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second it.
Moving second, all those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. We're actually moving right along. Our cars might still be semi-warm by the time we get out there. Discussion items, the office copier.
In your packet, first thing after the meeting report, I highlighted in yellow the terms, or some of the highlights of the contract, and you'll note that it says it's a gold service agreement, that it will cover the copier for all parts, labor, and copy drum. It does not include developer, toner, and networking issues. We have no problem with the network. It's tied in wireless from the computers, and we have the toner, and the developer drum is probably the biggie, and so no service contract covers that anyway. So I feel that the price of $113.40 is a pretty
That's pretty good.
good.
I mean, that's really good. I mean,
And it's not like a copier that we do a heavy-duty photocopying. It's just for office duplicates, or if I gotta send someone a copy of something, I'll make it. So we're not a heavy producer like a bigger machine or a bigger office would be. So I think we're gonna be in good shape.
yeah. I mean, one service call, the labor rate alone would probably
Oh,
Yeah,
be way more than what.
triple that.
no
Yeah.
doubt.
I will entertain a motion to authorize signing the maintenance contract.
Yeah, we'll second it.
Moved and
So I
seconded.
made it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Thank you, John.
Yep. Next item is a proposed policy as a result of discussions at the last meeting. And as my email indicated, that the cost for doing the yearly maintenance on the system that the commission approved, that wasn't approved by the Board of Health, there is no maintenance contract. It doesn't require one. So the extra costs weren't an issue there. And I checked with the DEP approval letter and also with the manufacturer of that advanced enviro technology. And they confirmed that there isn't. So that was just some misinformation that we had received.
So realistically, it would have been a minimal cost for the product to install versus having to tear up asphalt and put in a replication area.
Right? Yep.
I was not here, and I remember everything leading up to this meeting. And we were pretty strong on our opinion. What changed it?
The engineer came back,
Yeah.
and he came back with the Board of Health chairman,
Yeah.
who felt that it wasn't fair to the homeowner to bear that expense of yearly maintenance for the contract that would be required from this technology. And the engineer had indicated when he first started his presentation that the commission wanted an advanced treatment unit,
Right.
which was discussed originally at the first meeting.
Right.
And then, subsequent to that meeting, he emailed me and asked if the Presby Advanced Enviro Technology, septic technology would be acceptable, and I felt it was a good compromise between the cost of a advanced treatment unit, which is a module that you stick into a tank in line from the septic tank to the leaching system.
Right.
And so I had explained to him that that would probably be an
Okay.
acceptable alternative.
Yeah.
And he came in with that at our next meeting. We looked at it, we felt it was approvable, but he indicated that the Board of Health wouldn't approve it because he had already gone to them the day after our meeting. He
So where
went-
would we have gone if they wouldn't approve it and we wouldn't approve it?
Well, if the commission
Some
had
kind of
said,
arbitration?
the commission said, no, you know, we're not going to approve anything but the plan that we liked, let's say, they could go to Superior Court and have a court hear the case and either rule in favor of the commission or in favor of the Board of Health. And so it would have been a long-term, most likely 2 years, costly for both sides of the issue. And so I think the commission did the right thing, because once it was pointed out that they were offering no mitigation whatsoever, it kind of broke the ice jam. And by the time the meeting was over, the commission had required a lot of mitigation on site for conservation easement, markers, and
Yeah.
plantings.
Removing of asphalt and impervious surfaces,
Okay, all right.
which wasn't on the original plan.
That it was a good compromise.
Hmm.
However, I think having a policy so that, that all engineers, because it was pointed out at the meeting that it should be a policy that all engineers follow, and have it fairly specific so that they know how to deal with each case. And each site is obviously unique, and therefore we still have to leave some flexibility. So you'll note in the different options here under case number 3 and case number 4 that it's always ends the policy with a case-by-case basis, because you can't just have a formula and say that it works for everything. And case number 1 is where you have a lot and there's new construction being proposed, whether there's a disturbed or undisturbed buffer. On new construction, Title V doesn't allow a waiver by the local board anyway, so the commission should not grant any waiver as well. on case number 2, when there's an existing septic system and the engineer is designing it for more bedrooms than the existing number of bedrooms, that's what they call an increase in flow and is considered just like new construction.
Right.
There's no waivers that can be granted for that by the local Board of Health. So again, no waiver would be granted for that. Under case number 3, it's when you have an existing house with a failed septic system with no increase in bedroom counts or flow. I laid out a waiver for a 1 to 10 foot waiver, which would mean that you're working between 40 and 49 feet away from the wetlands. You would basically just have a restricted use of that buffer around the septic area, which is basically a conservation easement. As it gets closer to the wetlands, by each one of those, each paragraph after that, the guideline requires plantings with conservation easements and advanced treatments, depending on how close you're getting. And when you finally get to the point where you're within 10 feet of the wetland, you need to have an advanced treatment unit, which is that module instead of just the advanced septic treatment in the leaching field. So I think it's pretty fair under commercial and mixed residential use. Sometimes you have let's say you have a office building with apartments above it, if it's allowable. That shouldn't, because it's got some commercial use in it, there could be some chances for different wastewater characteristics that might be a heavy pollutant in it versus just the residential pollutant. So I've outlined a couple of things there that would allow for a waiver to be granted. But it's a lot more strict because it's commercial. And so what I thought the commission should do is take a look at it and read it and see if you want to make any changes to it, because it's basically just a first draft attempt, and it's very difficult to think of everything as you're doing it yourself, but once a different eye looks at it, you might come up with something that might have a good question, and I go, boy, that's a good point I didn't even think about, so we can work on this. But as soon as it's something that the commission wants to approve, I think we need to get it out to the engineers so that they will either decide that they don't want to ask for a waiver whatsoever, or they have no choice and they have to show us on the plan these different steps that mitigate the fact that they're too close according to Title V. And you'll see that I attached the actual section of Title V to the back page that shows that there is no asterisk next to the setback required for bordering vegetated wetlands, so that it was said in the meeting that the particular wetland at Ash Street had no particular sensitivity, and there is nothing in Title V that says, oh, well, some wetlands are more sensitive than others. And when they do, they spell it out that it's an actual surface water supply tributary wetland. So, for example, say you have a stream that eventually runs into a surface water supply, which this town doesn't have. They require 100 feet away because they realize that the wetlands that feed a tributary to a surface water supply, you need a bigger setback. So there, they have a greater distance requirement, and also the certified vernal pools, which they want 100 feet from the septic system. So Title V recognizes that there is a need to have some space between the polluter, which is the septic leaching field, and the wetland. So I pointed out that in the notes below that the location of all the test pits need to be shown on the plan. And where the engineer deems the soil to be unsuitable, the plan needs to show the test logs and the perk tests that were done to show that it's unsuitable. Because, just because it doesn't look good, or that it's a slower rate, I'm gonna move close to the wetlands. I think with having these items shown on the plan, the commission can argue there is no need to go near the wetlands. You can go out front. Sure, it might be a little costlier, but that's where we want that septic system to be, or else you're gonna have to do advanced treatment or one of the steps that are outlined in the policy. The other area that's highlighted and underlined and in bold is, it has to show that there's no, you have to prove that there's no other alternative. You just can't say there's no other alternative. I think the engineer should come to the commission and say, we did perk tests out front and it never perked. Water never moved. It won't accept water, no matter how slow it goes into the ground. We just shouldn't take the face value from the engineer that the soil did not perk. We need to see where the evidence is that you tried, and it surely doesn't perk. So those are the highlights of it. I recommend that you take a look at it, and we can put it on the agenda at the next meeting.
So even though the engineers should know what they're doing with the bylaws and the towns, this just benefits us to the point where they can't argue with us,
It's a policy, it's,
bickering back and forth like we had in the last couple of meetings, so I think this is more of a benefit to us.
Yes, definitely.
So that, basically, they set that on themselves.
and they know coming in here from now
Now-
on that you meet these three criteria, then you're gonna have to,
Even though it was kinda hard to believe that the engineer at that meeting didn't know he had to do this, I had to do that. From my intake from what he was saying, oh, I didn't know that, I didn't have to do that. Well, I think he should, right? The engineer should know the bylaws and know that if you are 50 feet from, or 100 feet from the wetlands, you are definitely gonna have to come in front of us and some kind of, show a little bit of mitigation if there's an issue with the yard or wherever the septic system.
and also being up to date with the technology that he's installing.
True,
I mean,
so,
not having to have a maintenance contract was a huge factor in that hearing, and come to find out, there wasn't one required. Yeah, I
Has he
mean,
been made aware of that?
well,
Yeah.
because I know, Mo, you weren't here last time. and
No, and I wish they had.
I just
been.
kind of felt like
Yeah,
we got kicked around,
yeah, yeah.
and
Yeah.
we shouldn't have been, treated like that. That's my opinion,
I agree with you.
so.
And I just want to point out that this policy allows the commission, no matter which case, to look at it on a case-by-case basis. So it's not concrete for each one of those, even though, it spells out what would be acceptable mitigation. So let's say it's easy for an engineer to meet one of those criteria because they propose mitigation of a conservation easement, plantings according to a guideline that we put out, not what they decide they want to put in, and maybe advanced septic technology. Well, at least they've given you something and we don't have to argue for it, and you can make a decision on that and maybe ask for a little more or say, no, it's not necessary, because on a case-by-case basis leaves that flexibility.
And that's what we've been doing all the time.
Right,
I
and
mean,
it,
all
and
along, it's
Right.
case by case.
Yeah.
and it's not arbitrary because it depends on the site. I grabbed a couple of previously approved sites and looked at them and said, these sites had particular characteristics that wouldn't really work too well by having a 50-foot buffer worked onto that lot, that it just didn't have enough room even in the front yard to meet it, so that you can't pigeonhole every one of the lots in town to one of these cases. So that's why we still have to be flexible, but it's not arbitrary either. It's really based on the shape and the site conditions, the site constraints. So you can't be considered making arbitrary decisions from one to the next when you have this kind of a policy.
Did John Cruz speak to the issue, or?
He did ask to speak before the commission and made some points about why the Board of Health didn't feel that it was fair to this homeowner to have to go with that expensive yearly contract that we were requiring from the engineer.
Contract, yeah.
The not needed contract.
I guess, and we're addressing a lot of it, but when we get into the slippery slope of what a financial burden is from one
Yeah.
person to another is tricky business, but, you know, as far as precedents and so forth, but this is water under the bridge, the ruling's been made, and
It's almost kinda like saying somebody wants to come in and build a house on a house lot, they wanna build this size house. And you can't make me build a small one, even though what the septic system isn't gonna be able to fit on there, and, you know,
Well-
before you do that stuff, you have to take in the fact, what size of lot, what kinda house. I mean, you just can't build any kinda house on a
Right.
lot and expect everything to fit right without any problems or changing anything.
Exactly. And that case is pointed out with that 40B on Scotland Street. They started off with over 100
Yeah.
units, and because the septic system can only handle fewer units, they had to chop down the number of proposed dwelling units that they wanted to put out there based on the septic system. Well, it's kind of similar to that. What you're referring to, Lee, is that you would like to take this small postage stamp sized lot and put the biggest house on it that you can, but if you can't meet all the other requirements for setbacks, zoning, wetlands, it doesn't necessarily mean that the town has to say,
Yeah.
you can put that Taj Mahal on that postage stamp lot. You can put a house there.
And we're not telling them that he can't, or that they can't. They just have to put the size that they have
To make everything
everything
fit.
work.
Yep,
on there.
yep.
Well, this gives them a set of expectations for us, so. Plus, once we do this and we decide we refine it, can another commission come and dispute what we all agreed on? Like what I've
The Board of
seen?
Health did.
Yeah, I mean, if we decide amongst ourselves, is there some way to give this some gravity? You know, we can expect a lot, but if somebody's gonna come in and say, you can't do that, then
Well-
you know,
Who's it gonna hold up?
right.
It still may be something that the Board of Health doesn't feel is necessary. So we still may have to deal with that as some of those issues arise in the future. But I find that most engineers will come in and ask for, what are your guidance, what are your guidelines, what are your policies, and try to abide by them and just submit what is necessary and leave it at that.
Mhm.
So usually, it doesn't become an issue.
Now, can we put something in, add this into this, saying that this is what we require and no other board or anything can dispute of what we have here? Or is that just something that,
Or is this something that needs to
Can't
go to
be.
legal, or is this something that needs to go to selectmen, or?
No, I think we can't dictate to another, like a planning board or Board of Health or zoning board, that they need to do something that we require. We just have to go by what your regulations and your bylaw says, and then deal with the difference of opinions amongst boards, like we did for that night when the Board of Health was in and felt strongly against what the commission was looking for.
I know I wasn't here, and I did read what you sent out, and I was here prior to that, but I don't understand where the Board of Health comes in and
That's why I told
can
her.
require us to change. Granted, we didn't make that decision, or it wasn't what we had, it was a mix-up, but it's uncomfortable to see that we're sitting here making decisions when someone comes and say, that's not right, you can't do that. You can't protect the water, you can't protect the
And I mean, as I
wetlands,
said at the meeting, that
because
our-
it's too expensive.
we
got
try to
some
look at the
mitigation
financial
to be-
end of it,
Right.
but that's not our first responsibility as somebody's financial
exactly.
problem.
That's dangerous
It's the
business.
environment and
Right,
the
Right.
law that we're
Right.
supposed to enact and
Exactly.
work with. And we try to, and
Right.
at least ever since I've been involved, look at what we can do the least expensive way for the residents, especially on a failed system that needs
Exactly.
repair and upgrade.
that's why we're here, that's why we're regular people, making
Right.
decisions for people who
And
aren't here.
It was just a shame that we were fed a bunch of misinformation
Yeah.
that night that we kind of got,
And
at
as
least
you
said,
said,
bullied
we
into
could
making.
reopen it, but
It's not,
But then that's
Right.
gonna, in the long run, it won't.
It just
won't-
feels like what we were doing before, when we were trying to, attach wetland protections to the sale of the houses, when we were, getting up, saying, well, we need this to be protected, and you need to tell the next person who buys the house.
yeah.
Again, now we do this, and we have this, and I think this is great. I think this
Yeah.
is awesome for the engineers and all
We
that, but,
We can establish these policies.
And it ju-
yeah.
Sure.
And that's why
you
there's
can't say
enough
that we did this.
wiggle
to
room
them.
that we
They
can case by
told
case.
us to
Yeah.
do this
Exactly.
for them.
That's the
Right.
key anyway.
right.
I mean,
But I've only seen us run into this once before on the
It hasn't
so-called
happened.
financial
No,
burden.
Right.
this hasn't happened. I don't remember.
And
this.
again, this one, if they had
Like
come
this.
before us in the beginning and said we can do mitigation somewhere, but there was no other option except an advanced system for the
And
mitigation.
the
A
whole
lot
thing,
of bedrooms or something.
the whole issue with this whole thing was financial burden.
Hmm.
It was a
Right from the
6-bedroom.
beginning, right from the beginning, so.
That's right.
It was six,
Whatever that
That's
was.
the whole issue
Right.
was.
Yeah, yeah.
6 bedrooms. The system that would be designed outside the 50-foot buffer, in the horrible soils that were outside the 50-foot buffer, would have cost $100,000 according to some estimate that was mentioned. And that by moving it within 20 feet of the wetlands, they found better soils and with a 40% reduction in the required leaching area that Title V says you need for
Mhm.
6 bedrooms,
Mhm.
they were able to fit it in. And it would be a,
Mhm.
40,000
No.
45
$1,000
system.
Yeah,
system.
45.
So there was our concession to financial burden with just this one tank we needed in there. And
Right.
they weren't willing to go even that far. We could have drawn the line and said,
Right,
no.
we-
But they also only got one estimate from contractor and didn't go out
Hmm.
anymore, so, I mean, that's just up to. We got-
So I think as the meeting progressed and things were said, and it became obvious that there was kind of an impasse, the ice was broken by requiring the applicant's engineer to come up with some mitigation that at least would convince the commission that they should move off of where they felt they should be versus what the Board of Health felt that they should be.
So the mitigation will cost money.
Right.
It will,
Ripping up the asphalt.
Which, now that we look at it, it's actually probably gonna cost more than if they had put in the advanced treatment without the maintenance.
And
So-
again,
Sure,
for
makes sense.
a little town like us, and new technology coming at us all the time, you wanna look towards the future, you don't wanna
Go
go
backwards.
backwards, you know?
And we
And-
were looking towards the future. We
Yeah,
told them.
exactly, and that bodes well for, I think, a little town like us, that we can, look forward to the future, but backwards thinking seems to be the way to go, I guess, lately,
Oh.
so,
Yeah, I'm proud of what we've done.
And I think the only way would have, to
exactly,
get around that, would have been if there was sewage,
right.
Right.
Again,
Yeah.
so.
but, again.
So we'll look it over and
sure, and again, just to point out that the worst case, where they would be asking for the septic to be anywhere from 0 feet away from the wetlands to 9 feet, requires the advanced treatment system only if there's no other alternative.
Right, and they have to prove
So
that there's
it's
no
all-
other alternative.
yeah.
So, I mean, they have to do their homework,
Yeah.
which,
On all the other ones, they don't have to show that there's no other I believe, I'm just quickly looking, that, I don't think it says that, that there has to be no other alternative. You can still do that, but you gotta meet those mitigation measures. And so I think this is fair, and it's not overly costly to put a conservation easement on record. To do some plantings, yes, that might be a little bit more expensive, but probably $1,200 or so.
Mhm.
And when you have to put the advanced treatment unit, then that does require a maintenance contract. It does require maybe $5,000 to $7,000 more added on to the conventional cost of a septic system. But that's only required when you're working within 10 feet or up to 19 feet away from the wetlands. And I think being that close, you do need to have something more than just a conventional septic system.
Mhm.
Everything farther away only requires the advanced treatment technology that's in the leach field, such as the Presby and Biro advanced septic technology, which is passive, does not require maintenance, does not require any contracts. So I think the rest of those are all typical of what we see when they ask for to be allowed to put a septic system within 50 feet of a wetland on a failed septic system. I think those are all pretty reasonable requirements, and that as long as it's in a policy, those probably would be shown to you on the plan without us having to ask for it. And it should be pretty automatic where they make their presentation, the recommendation is to approve it, and the commission votes and we move on. It's not getting into these big arguments.
and they know going in that whatever design they give us, and they give the Board of Health, will already have it in it. So it's not like they have to go back to the Board of Health and negotiate in something, or is a change that's
Yeah.
gonna trigger why you're making the change.
Right.
I mean, it's just a given that this is what you're gonna do.
Yeah, I like it.
All right, I'll put it on the agenda, or do you wanna,
Yeah.
does it really require,
Just put it on the agenda for approval.
okay. I've attached a email message that I sent out on the enforcement order for 225 South Street, and also email attachment to the Model Airplane Club license agreement that I wanted town council to review. So when I get some feedback from that, I will give the commission an update. Otherwise, I think we'll just leave it off the agenda until
We get something.
we get something back from them. Has anybody heard about a special town meeting at all? Any?
Nope.
Not yet.
I think there might be a special town meeting before the annual town meeting for some provisions for the possibility the water department needs to address or something like that. And while drafting up an order of conditions for Pleasant Street, Trevi Icos Company, the one that's next door to the one we just heard about tonight, they have a lot of underground drainage systems that are under basically parking areas, and picture the Market Basket parking lot with everybody parked over it, and underneath is not only their septic system in one
Nice.
area, but a big drainage system in quite a few other areas. And their order of conditions required them to do yearly maintenance and to supply us reports. But we have no teeth to ask them for it because they've received their certificate of compliance. So what this new MS4 bylaw, the stormwater bylaw that the town passed, does allow for what we call drainage stormwater agreements to be made between the owner and the commission, the town. So the agreement spells out that they will maintain their system in accordance with the maintenance plan that's submitted that we approve. And it goes farther than before, where it says that they agree that if they don't maintain it and the town has to step in, that the town will lien their property for the cost of maintaining the property. And in order to do that, we need to adopt one of the Mass general laws that allows us to lien that property just like a water lien.
Yeah.
But the water lien is not the same as a drainage lien, so we have to specifically have that approved. And so I'm proposing to the commission that we should ask if there is a special town meeting, that we can put a warrant on, an article on the town meeting warrant that says that the town will adopt the provisions of Chapter 40, Section 58, I believe it is, of the Mass General Laws that allows the town to get back the money that it needs to go in and maintain a private.
Now, this would also cover inspections?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we
I
know
mean,
if
they
people
may not
are
need any-
doing that?
Oh, yeah, I mean, Market Basket for one. So
We haven't gotten anything.
it only hurts a company like that, or the property management owners of a place like Market Basket or any of the other sites,
To not do it.
to not do it, because they're gonna have to dig up their parking lot
If
and,
it fails and there's a problem.
We have a mandate to do it twice a year, which we do because it makes sense.
Right.
to
Yep.
do it.
Preventive maintenance, I mean, it's.
That's right, yeah.
so the first time that happens, then they realize, oh, we do have to do this. But we feel that if that's the case and it doesn't affect the wetlands or the street drainage, so be it. It's their problem and not a big issue, but it's those particular ones that where the system starts overflowing,
Sure.
creates issues to the wetlands or to the drain systems in our streets,
Yeah.
then the town needs to step in under those situations. And again, not everyone, but just those types. And they should be compensated for having the highway department out there cleaning out and jetting out sediment-laden pipes that are not
Who's
flowing out.
administrating it?
The Conservation Commission is the stormwater authority.
Well, the town doesn't
But
come
I
and do
mean,
it for
in
us,
the
so.
long run, this is gonna,
You know, why would they do it for
cover.
them?
Well, we need, yeah, you need some teeth to these things.
Yeah.
They've agreed to do it, but how do you enforce it?
And I don't see
Short
how
of
it
a
can.
long court case or?
I don't see how they can't say no, because it's not gonna cost us anything. It's gonna cost a
You mean the vote?
business owner,
Yeah,
I think,
right.
so it's gonna
Should be-
benefit the town.
should be
Yeah.
easy.
And only when it's not being done and it creates an issue,
And it
not,
makes
not
sense.
just,
I mean,
Yeah.
oh, we're gonna go in and
Yeah.
clean your system
Right.
for you
Yeah.
this year because we wanna charge you some
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be done
I
that
wouldn't mind
way.
if they came and cleaned mine.
It's just when they become an issue, and that's what the agreement says, that,
And it's a way to send an inspector in to make sure that it's inspected and say, okay, here's
It's
the
not
fee for
failing,
the
yeah.
inspection.
So we
because-
wouldn't do it on a preventative measure basis?
no, not to collect that fee.
Not the
It
fee,
would- I
but,
mean, that's what they would
Right.
be doing, is doing their own maintenance as a preventive
Yeah, I mean,
measure. But
They're gonna be paying to do it no matter what.
right.
So
If
they
it
have to-
fails, they have to
if it
clean
fails,
up.
So if
they
it
just have to-
overflowed, I mean, Board of Health has the power to step in and do something.
Oh, on
don't they?
septic,
On
yes.
septic,
Yeah.
but if it's the stormwater,
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah.
Like Market
Yeah.
Basket's right next to
yeah,
it.
I mean,
Yeah.
Market Basket's
God,
got
they
such a
would-
huge
yeah.
Yeah,
underground
Mm.
drainage system that
gets clogged
if
up.
that gets clogged and backs up,
Right,
I mean,
It could
that lift
affect,
the whole parking lot
Mm.
theoretically out of the,
And the wetland's like right there.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean,
knock down one of the walls.
Yeah.
bust it
But
out.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
the bylaw wasn't in effect at that time, and there was no way we could get an agreement. But
Yeah.
this agreement would be signed by both the owner of the property and the commission on behalf of the town. And then it runs with the property because it gets recorded at the registry of deeds, so that future owners
Yeah.
have to abide by it because it's in the deeds.
Going
Right.
forward with so many of these projects, I think we're gonna see more of these type of systems.
Oh, sure,
Just, I
because
mean,
even
Because of
on,
the value
And
of the
to be
land and where
ready,
they're
we
being
should
put.
have expectations
And
and
they're gonna try to put
policies.
everything they can do, like
Right.
you said. They're gonna make it as big as they can, put everything in this
Right.
spot that they want, and they're gonna do it the best way, that the way that they're gonna want to do it.
and the comment tonight about the Pleasant Street project that was shown to the commission this evening talked about this long swale that was
Mm.
oversized. Well, those types of oversized long swales don't require a lot of maintenance because they have a lot of room for sediment to build up along the bottom, and it doesn't really affect anything because it's so spread out. But the idea that a lot of the engineers are using is to put it underground in a smaller footprint so that it doesn't take up as much space that you can use for your site. So they put it underground into chambers, and they're using technologies called like stormwater grit chambers, storm scepters, which are advanced technology to get rid of the suspended solids in the water, such as sand and sediments and floatables. But those aren't the old, take the truck out to the side of the street with a scoop and pull out the crap in the bottom of the catch basin and dump it in the truck. They need a vacuum truck. They need special attention, and you're gonna see a lot more of that. And if the owners of the property don't even realize they have those in their parking lot, they just move in and go years without cleaning out the storm scepter, for example, it's gonna create an issue, and somebody has to go in and clean it. Now, if they do it, fine. If they don't do it and it's creating issues, then the town has the ability to recoup the cost of going in and doing it for them. Or say they go bankrupt and they just no longer can do the work, the town can do it, and then eventually when the property is sold, they get the money back on the sale of the property. So I'm mentioning all that because it ties in with the order of conditions that are being written for the Trevi Icos company that you'll be seeing. And then also, because it'll have that agreement in it, and then also with the fact that if we do have a special town meeting, I'm gonna ask that the commission propose that article for the town meeting warrant. So, other than that, we have some signing to do.
Signatures and
First one is the determination of applicability, which is, the signature page is marked with the blue tab. The second is the order of conditions for 61 Ash Street, the one we talked about with the septic system.
That's right,
yeah, just
The next one is for the moving of the isolated wetland on Manley Street and the creation of a replicated bordering vegetated wetland in its place, and a abbreviated order of condition, an amended order of conditions for 102 West Center Street is on with that blue, with that yellow tab. We have an invoice for the Appalachian Mountain Club for being part of the Bay Circuit Trail Alliance, and that's for $50. And last but not least, we have a invoice for Adrian signs, which was signed at the last meeting, except for the form had the wrong account number to charge it to, so rather than crossing off and making a mess out of the original signatures that you did, we're asking for brand-new signatures, and we'll turn it in without any cross-offs. We're not double paying them, we're just squaring away our bookkeeping. Thank you.
That's it. And I think unless anybody has anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Whoopee.